Hoy tenemos una entrevista exclusiva con Erik Prince, reconocido empresario y fundador de Blackwater. Nos brindará su visión sobre los temas geopolíticos más relevantes del momento. No te lo perderás.
En este momento nos enfocamos en los medios de comunicación. Por supuesto, se enfocan en Israel. Por supuesto, los medios de comunicación en Estados Unidos son. Igualmente, hay una tendencia a olvidar las amenazas que se encuentran en nuestra propia región. Me gustaría realizar una especie de descripción general de la zona y las amenazas que existen. Para nosotros, hay un par de países con los que realmente necesitamos colaborar. Para comenzar, tomemos influencia perjudicial que proviene de los socialistas, una amenaza formidable. Y yo, sentimos que estamos involucrados en esto. Donald Trump tiene la capacidad de generar un gran impacto. Proporciónanos una visión general y abordaremos algunos de...
That is a huge problem. The money from there has been spilling all through the rest of Latin America, and even into Guatemala, Honduras. Very left-wing government there. Nicaragua, of course, the Sandinistas are again in charge. Daniel Ortega, the same jackass that was supporting full-on communism in the 80s. Right. So you have a couple of spots of great light with a lot of darkness. El Salvador, what Bukele did 5 years ago, winning an election, and I think that was an act of true desperation. They said, okay, Bukele, do it. He won on a security platform, and he won, and he did. He locked up just under 2% of the population, 70,000 gangsters, the MS-13, because it was the most dangerous place in the Western Hemisphere in terms of the gang murders, and he locked it down, and it's amazing. It's now safer in El Salvador than Prince William County. Okay, Prince William County, where the FBI crime lab is located, where Quantico is El Salvador safer. So governance really matters, and so you can't let you have to have more El Salvadors and more Argentinas. Of course, Colombia is now, you went from a right-wing government that largely defeated the FARC to this guy Petro, who used to be a member of M19, which was the Communist Party of Colombia back in the 80s when they attacked and took a whole bunch of diplomats hostage in the foreign ministry in Bogota. They did that, and now the guy, one of those terrorists, is now the elected president of Colombia.
So, you talk about money flowing through the region, particularly from, like you said, Cuba to Venezuela.
Narco money, Cuban, I would say, organization and intelligence, and a lot of now Chinese money, okay? They're investing in the region. It's soft money, soft power, gaining access to ports. Huge port access in Peru, in Ecuador, and in Chile. They're there for the resources, and they're there to spread significant economic power.
But that's where this malign influence comes, in part. It's narco money, but it's also the Chinese making these investments in infrastructure and basically tying the hands of some of these leaders. With loans, with infrastructure loans and so forth, that ties them down forever and allows China to have their influence.
And it pays off the leaders, right?
El video difundido, en el que María Corina Machado aparece dando un parte de tranquilidad tras ser detenida por fuerzas del régimen de Nicolás Maduro, tras aparecer públicamente en una manifestación en el sector de Chacao, en Caracas, ha suscitado un sinnúmero de teorías entre quienes lo han visto y ha puesto de nuevo el nombre de Erik Prince a sonar.
La ceremonia de investidura de Maduro, su juramentado, de forma concisa, líder de la oposición que fue impedido, votación, como usted ha señalado a todos aquí. En Venezuela solo la detuvieron brevemente, pero se propagó la noticia de que durante varios meses ella formó parte de una manifestación en contra de su juramento y el disparo salió por la culata de forma muy rápida. ¿Qué se puede interpretar?
Because she's been in hiding for
Entiendo
months.
que ellos la
She
llevaron
came
a
out
cabo.
to join a
Graba algún
protest
tipo
against
de
his
video,
swearing
pero
in.
hay ciertas palabras de
And she was
inquietud
detained.
They took her
and
off the
that
motorcycle.
did
y
backfire very
posteriormente
quickly.
ella fue
What's your read on
liberada.
it?
Así que no estoy
I
seguro
understand
de si
I think they
realmente
made
fue
her,
liberada. Alguien llamó y
record
dijo,
some kind of video, but
espera,
there was certain distress
déjala
words,
libre. No podemos
indicated in that
permitirlo.
video,
O si
and then she
compran
was
su
released.
camino.
So I don't
En
know
nuestra
if she
situación
was,
podría ser cualquiera de
someone
las
called
dos
and said, "Whoa, release
alternativas.
her.
No
We
tengo
can't
seguridad,
have that,"
por
or if they
supuesto.
bought their way out
Pero
of the
ella es
situation,
un
it could be either
político
one. I
valiente.
don't know
Así
clearly,
es.
but she is-
Y el hecho de que se mantenga
she is a brave
allí
politician.
y
Yeah.
permanecer
And the
en la
fact that she's
lucha
staying
y
there
la
and staying in the
lucha a
fight
gran
and the struggle
escala
at great
personal,
personal
punto
risk.
riesgo. Edmundo González, el
the guy
individuo que
he was the
simbolizaba la
face that
victoria
won
en
the
las
free election,
elecciones
or the
democráticas
election,
o
personal
la
risk.
elección.
Edmundo Gonzalez, the guy he was the face that won the free election, or the election that was stolen. The regime went so far as detained his son-in-law, arrested him, probably abusing him. So look, the regime is resorting to every kind of strong arm tactic. But I'm hopeful that Maria Corina will stay true to the purpose and see this through. What the Trump administration inherits is a mess. The only thing the Biden administration has done is raise the bounty on Maduro and Diosdado Cabello slightly. Senator Scott introduced a bill based on a tweet I did back in August that they should raise it to $100 million each because of, and they don't need to use U.S. tax dollars. They can use frozen Venezuelan government money that we're already sitting on. Look. There's a way to do this. I think it's going to be through covert action. I can't see, it's not going to be a case of sending the Marines to oust Maduro. Not necessary. He is not popular. He lost, but 70% of the people voted against him, and that includes most of the security forces. They are tired of the socialist nonsense and ready to make a change.
And Trump's going to have to look Chevron in the eye and say, sorry, fellas, but the fat times are over. We need to put tough sanctions back in and cut off the oil.
Yeah, Chevron, Harry Sargent, the rest, they're on the wrong side here, and it's probably time to name and shame their board members again, just because they are actually supporting a Marxist government that is oppressing their people.
Understood, but Joe Biden basically gave them the free pass to do it.
He did.
As well, right? So
that's the very corrupting influence of that kind of money on lobbyists in Washington.
Okay, let me touch real briefly also on Panama. Very, very interesting. Donald Trump's not even in office. He talks about the Panama Canal. He talks about the U.S. being, charged outrageous rates to utilize the canal, that China's got their influence on the canal, and Donald Trump says, well, time for us to maybe take it back.
I understand it is within the rights of the United States for national security purposes to take over the administration of the canal. The problem is the Chinese have bought in to the port management and largely control both ends of it. So yes, there is a significant soft, which could become hard power Chinese capability in Panama. That is a major problem, because if we're going to have a problem in the Pacific with China, it means it's a naval fight, which means you have to be able to ship resources from the East Coast to the West Coast quickly. That means through the Panama Canal, so you don't have to drive all the way around the southern tip of Chile, to add an extra month onto the transit. So us having clear control and security of the Panama Canal is a national security priority. So, and Trump is right to finally call it out, to say, hey, we built that, we administered it. Jimmy Carter gave it away unwisely in the late 80s or in the late 70s. It's time for us to revisit that problem.
Well, which is, so we agree that something has to happen. It's just how Trump gets it done is the real challenge, right? And the big question mark around it. How do you accomplish that? Going to put some economic pressure on Panama, perhaps? Diplomatic pressure?
He has a wide range of options available to him.
That's a great response. Look, we got to talk about Ecuador. And there's an election coming up. And it's really interesting to me as I studied up on Ecuador, thanks to some research that you provided me. I realized, wow, what a strategic interest we have there, and some leadership change that could come that's thoroughly against our interest. So let's break it down. Tell us about the election that's coming up,
Sure.
and then we'll go into history.
So Ecuador, just south of Colombia, a country with significant reach, significant resources, a very wealthy country in the making. A huge fishery, I think the second largest tuna catch in the world. They own the Galapagos. Significant oil produced. And significant port access. So what happened is a guy named Daniel Noboa won an interim election, which was held, it was kind of a snap election because the previous president was going to be potentially impeached. So Noboa's in there for about a year. Now there's a general election called February 9. And what's happened is kind of like the rot that happened in Venezuela with Chavismo. This guy, Rafael Correa, was a super leftist. He took power in 2008 already and started taking the country in a very left-wing direction.
Through 2017.
Through 2017. He loaded up the country with $24 billion in Chinese debt and really became beholden to them. He kicked out the U.S. from a significant base, which was used for counter-narcotics from Manta, which is a port up in the northwest of Ecuador. And he basically did all the wrong things, cozied up to the Russians, cozied up to the Chinese, cozied up to the Venezuelans. And now a complete surrogate for Rafael Correa, a woman named Luisa Gonzalez, who we think is even a mother to one of his children. Okay, she's running as the perfect surrogate.
Let's talk about pillow talk.
With the money and political organization of Correa. Of course, Correa had to run away from the country for corruption charges, and he's now hiding out in Belgium.
But he says a lot about our relationship with Belgium.
Exactly. Also problematic.
Right.
Yeah. So the amount of drugs that comes out of Ecuador that goes to Europe is highly significant. Right. All the coke that comes out of Colombia, Peru, out through Ecuador. So this is a huge problem if the leftist wins. Because you have basically another pickup for the socialist club of Venezuela, Colombia, and then Ecuador, because you already have a left-wing government in Peru as well. And so the Trump administration, takes over January 20, February 9. The Biden administration has been completely asleep at the switch and not pushing back on this leftist narco-Chinese nexus of soft power. Undermining American
interest. And probably
interest.
a lot of propaganda around the election, I would assume.
Yes, sure. Right. And sadly, Noboa's even had to deal with his own deep state because he takes over a year ago, and the holdovers from the Correa administration in the energy ministry, electricity ministry, so they've made major power shortages. They've had a massive gang revolt where they tried to take over the country a few days. So he's fighting multiple layers of leftist rot from outside influence and inside his country as well.
And it sounds like Noboa he's only been in office for a couple of years. So it sounds
like 14 months.
Okay.
So it's tough.
He really hasn't had a chance to make some substantial change yet.
Not a chance. But I think if he wins, and we really hope he does, he will take the country, of the economic advice of Milei with the security advice of Bukele from El Salvador.
But this, let's talk about U.S. strategic interests there. And my understanding is it's being, on the equator makes it the ideal position, by the way, for launching satellites.
Yes. Also a reason for Chinese interest, right? Imagine their ability to launch spacecraft from within our own hemisphere.
Right.
So again,
gracias por acompañarnos en este análisis tan importante sobre la geopolítica global y su impacto en nuestras vidas. Si te gustó este contenido, no olvides darle me gusta, suscribirte al canal y activar la campana para no perderte nuestros próximos videos. Tu apoyo es fundamental para que sigamos creando contenido de calidad y sobre todo, para continuar enfocándonos en temas cruciales para Venezuela y el mundo. Juntos, podemos informar, inspirar y generar el cambio que necesita. Nos vemos en el próximo vídeo. Hasta entonces, recuerda que la información es poder y cada uno de nosotros tiene un papel en construir un futuro mejor.